I'm Bowie. Thanks for coming. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, can everyone see it? Cool. Okay, so welcome to my presentation. This is Self-Made, Creating Your Custom Career Path. As young artists and designers, we come across examples of people who find success in starting their own creative businesses. We listen to these entrepreneurial success stories with admiration and awe, but then we're immediately reminded of all the work that's required in order to reach the finish line. All you can think to yourself is, I could never do that, and how could I possibly do that all by myself? Yes, there's the taxes and finding the right clients, but what could be better than doing the things you love for the rest of your life and making a living out of your passions from when you've got the talent, the interest, and the potential? Entrepreneurship is a huge gray area, especially for artists and designers. In school, the business of art is an untouched topic, even though starting a business is a likely possibility for any one of us. Every once in a while, I hear people proposing the idea of starting an agency or starting up a small Etsy shop. You hear a lot of entrepreneurship stories about people just investing all of their time and money that they have into starting up a business, but not everyone has the time or the patience to do that without experimentation and failure. Is there a way where I could save people time and money to set them in the right direction while minimizing the feeling of reluctance? For the past few weeks, through research and design, I tried to find a way to make entrepreneurship more accessible and approachable for young artists and designers alike, all while making it an experience that is rewarding every step of the way. I split my research into 3 phases. The first was getting to understand the subject for myself. As someone who fits into my target audience, as a designer who knows little to nothing about starting a business, I decided to use my lack of knowledge to my advantage in conducting the first phase of my research by studying whatever entrepreneurship resources available to me. This would help me get an idea of what information was out there for people who are trying to learn about it, and it would also help me compile a list of commonalities that I think were helpful and easy to understand for my audience. With just a few weeks to do this research, I had to choose my resources very carefully to get as much information I could as quickly as possible. But there was just too much information that I had to search through all at once, and that itself was really overwhelming. I needed to actually search through different sources and different mediums like books and digital media as well. Not to mention that I already had a few things professors and friends recommended me to look at. So without overthinking it for too much longer, I went out and went to a bunch of different bookstores around the city to see what I could find first. Many of the books I found were just your basic how to be an entrepreneur book, and by flipping through them, I could already narrow down which books I needed. Some books, for example, were very straightforward and offered definitions and charts with thorough breakdowns of subtopics. Generally, I was gravitating towards medium-sized books that had more informational hierarchy, more images, and a casual writing style that was more suitable and digestible for younger audiences. And if I found several books that were similar, I went on Amazon and looked at ratings and reviews to see if they were worth reading entirely. I ruled out books that used real-life examples from well-known companies and business owners like Google and Amazon, which I found to be really interesting but not so helpful for people starting out with small businesses. And there was also many other books that mentioned things that I personally found to be kind of irrelevant to my situation, like how to act like a boss or how to manage a team of employees. So I thought it'd be a good idea to compare all the information that was written in a general book about entrepreneurship to a book that had more in-depth information on one particular step, and that would hopefully help me determine what information I should include in my final product. I was primarily using the table of contents from Harvard Business's The Entrepreneurship Toolkit as a guideline, since each chapter um, laid out the steps of starting a business pretty clearly. So if I was reading about something like drafting up business plans, I would read the chapters pertaining to that subject. And if I didn't really understand it, I'd read up on it some more in some other concentrated books. I applied that same process for looking at digital resources and used online resources to expand my knowledge. Looking for online resources was better in some ways. Sure, there was a lot of stuff to go through, but the difference between online material and books was that I was ultimately saving a lot of time with videos and podcasts, and I was able to find things that were more relatable to my own experience. And examples include the Futures channel on YouTube with Christo, who's a designer and has that experience starting his own business. And he offers advice based on what he's learned along the way. I also really loved Maria Brophy. She's an art consultant. She runs an agency helping artists sell and publicize their work. And she sort of gives advice on a blog that she runs online. So at this point, I was thinking of curating some kind of startup kit that would include all this information about entrepreneurship. So I decided to meet with a few people for interviews to get an understanding of the process of making a kit. I was able to talk to Becky Margraf, who came a few years ago to give a lecture at MassArt, and she spoke about her work at Kiwi Crate and DIY with Art, which are both curriculum and program-based creative platforms for kids and young adults. And I also spoke to Olivia Sheldon, who took part in the making of America's Test Kitchen's newly launched Young Chefs Club, which is a cooking subscription box for kids. So regardless of whether or not I was going to be making a kit in the end, I felt that it was important to hear their opinions on my degree project, since their experience also included a lot of research and information design in their process. And the advice they gave me really changed the way I continued on with my project. Something that they mentioned that I never really thought about when it came to subscription boxes was the lifespan of the box. And what I mean by that is how the packaging and its contents are being produced and what they're being produced out of. So being conscious of the sustainability of materials, because realistically kids would finish whatever project came in the mail that month and it'd end up in the trash by the end of the process. This led them asking the question, what do you have to offer that other things don't? I needed to think about how my end product could solve my problem in a way that is different from any book or website I've looked at thus far. They recommended that I think very carefully about my audience and how I could solve this problem for every single person. My targeted audience is young creatives, which means that people who are painters and people who are metalsmiths are probably going to be seeking very different kinds of support, which meant that all the research I was doing about general steps of starting a business weren't going to pertain to every individual person. Moving on to the last phase of research, which was conducting surveys amongst people who fit my target audience. I asked two sets of questions. The first contained questions about how people viewed entrepreneurship and what their definition of the term was. It also included questions that asked what they already knew about starting a business, what they like to learn about it, and what worried them most if they were to start a business. The second set of questions were more about education and organization. After researching entrepreneurship for myself, I knew relatively how much work would go into starting a business. And since most of the people I was asking were students, I asked them how they dealt with big projects under different circumstances, how they stayed organized, and how they stayed motivated. What helped me gain some insight on how I should cater my experience for my audience in the final deliverable. I asked these questions to about 30 people who are mostly illustration and design students at MassArt. And when I asked them what they knew about entrepreneurship and what they wanted to learn about it, almost every single person said something along the lines of, I don't even know what I don't know. And when I asked them to imagine what it'd be like to start their own business, they said, I can imagine it being way too much to handle. Most people said they definitely didn't know anything about business and financing, but what worried them even more was that how they were going to balance life and work. They were worried about things like project management and time management, dealing with burnout, and things that were related to self-care and discipline. I had never really considered these things all this time, and it made me realize that these were exactly the things that made people hesitant about entrepreneurship, in addition to the stress of not knowing the technicalities of it. And I really wanted to address that moving forward. When I asked people how they dealt with stress and learning when they weren't feeling motivated, many people relied heavily on watching short videos, making lists, and keeping schedules to keep them on track. And with the idea to create a kit still in mind, I wanted to make several print pieces that would include charts, lists, and exercises that would guide people through the process of starting their own business, to make everything seem less daunting and less overwhelming. So I decided to do all the copywriting myself, as if I were translating everything that I learned into something that I could use to teach others. And as I was writing, I went back to one of the books that was recommended to me at the beginning of the semester, a book called The Creative Career Path by Andy J. Pizza, whose podcast I had also been using for reference. This book is really thin, probably about 10 to 15 pages, 2 to 3 sentences on each page. The book is made mostly out of illustrations, really large, colorful text. But this book basically had all the information and content that I was trying to include in my deliverable, and it felt like I was trying too hard to reinvent the wheel, and I really felt like I needed to create something that was really different. So the writing came to a stop for the time being, and I pivoted. Um, so I thought about the process I went through as a person of my audience. What could I make that could have saved me time and money when I was doing my research? If I was creating a physical product, was I really going to buy that, among other things as well? And what would make me buy it? What credibility would my product have over others? And why would anyone buy it when I could go online and get resources for free? I went back to my research question and really thought about how I could create something that could be both accessible and approachable for all young creatives who are interested in entrepreneurship. So I decided the best solution was to create a curriculum-based app. It would combine all the free resources into one place where anyone could access it whenever they wanted to immediately find what they needed. It would save time because they wouldn't have to look in multiple places to find what they were looking for. It'd be easy to access because everything you need was right in the app, and it'd be accommodating for whoever was using it, no matter what their background was. So there would be no worries about not being able to find relevant help. I was really struggling with how to organize everything, so I went on UX Worksheets, which is a website I use a lot for figuring out concept and structure. The website provides a list of diagnostic questions, and going back to what I was told during my interviews with Becky and Olivia, I needed to think about solving the problem for my audience. So what were the goals of the users of my app, and how would my app help them accomplish these goals? Thinking about that expected user flow, this led me to create an architecture map for the app. I wanted to include major milestones in starting a business, from thinking about what role you play in the creative industry to sustaining your business, to tracking your progress and learning from your experience along the way. So ultimately, the goal of this app was for users to learn in a way that was easy for them. And I kept thinking, how do people learn? And what do people do when they need to learn? And again, thinking back about my process leading up to this moment, all I really wanted was guidance. All I was looking for was knowledge from someone who knew what they were talking about. And not only did I want to learn from someone who was more experienced, but I wanted to be able to relate to others who are going through something similar. I wanted to be able to learn through connection. With this realization, all pages were structured to tie back to the courses page and other user profiles in order to encourage that continuous learning and continuous connection. Now that figuring out the architecture was out of the way, what was left to do was copywriting for each screen and designing the UX around that writing. The writing was mainly for onboarding section, where it makes the user subconsciously think about what they want their business to be as they progress. So it was a real challenge to limit myself to a few lines per screen. And I needed to introduce these complex subjects in a manner that maintained the attention and interest of the user. Additionally, I needed to keep the language friendly and approachable. This goes the same for UX, since there was a lot of text to work with. I needed to think about the hierarchy and presentation of information to make everything more digestible. And with the addition of bold colors and illustrations, the making was complete. So here's my final solution to making entrepreneurship more accessible and approachable. This is Sprout, a new educational guidance app for young creatives looking to learn about starting and maintaining a business. The app opens with a quick introduction. These screens are mainly to inform users about the main functions of the app. For new users, there's an onboarding process that includes a diagnostic questionnaire. This is to help the app gather information about the user in order to create a curriculum that is best suited to them. Every page has a brief tagline and a small description of what the question's purpose is. These first two are to get the user thinking about what their creative role is and what their business is going to look like. This is particularly for users who are unsure of how to move forward and are still trying to figure out what kind of work they want to produce. This next question pertains to the importance of influence and inspiration, which are unavoidable in the process of learning. And this asks the user to choose some images that they resonate with, and it'll help them subconsciously think about their own style of work, which ultimately helps the app determine what sources to gather from. The last question is similar, where it asks the user what they're interested in learning about, and it further helps curate that ideal curriculum for the user. Upon logging into the app each time, the user is rewarded with a login bonus, which gives exclusive access to interviews from professionals, and it acts as an encouragement to make constant progress. Afterwards, the user lands on the homepage, and they're encouraged to pick up from where they left off by continuing courses, or they can browse through recommended resources as well. So regardless of whether the user is like a designer, an illustrator, the Explore page allows the user to search for whatever resources and courses they're curious about. And each course offers a series of lessons that can be added to the user's curriculum. So when you click into one of these courses, you can see the title of the course, the source, the duration, how many lessons are included, and a short description of the course. There's also a section that shows how many people are taking the course, and this was added for that credibility and connection aspect that I was talking about earlier. More of that is present in the individual lesson page where users can post comments in the discussion page. People can ask questions and level with one another about the lesson for clarification. Timestamps are provided to clearly outline subject changes within lessons and help people pinpoint those exact moments of confusion in the comments. Lastly, to help users stay motivated and keep track of all their progress as it changes with the amount of knowledge they acquire, is a career goals page where the user can input small goals to complete and will break milestones down, making the process less overwhelming. So with that, final thoughts to leave you with. So recently I came across this quote by Austin Kleon, who is an author and illustrator, and it sums up the message that I'm kind of trying to portray throughout this whole project. Think process, not product. So I hope with this app, the feelings of pressure that young creatives are experiencing when thinking about starting a business can be mitigated and be replaced with feelings of accomplishment and fulfillment. Thank you.